The midnight I escaped my daughter's house, I heard her husband whisper, "Tomorrow will end her life." I took my bag, and one thing they never knew I had. I stood in the narrow hallway outside the guest room. The door cracked open just enough for the faint light to spill onto my shoes. My name is Saris, 74 years old, and tonight I knew I could not stay another second. I heard the words clear as glass. "Can you stop breathing so loud, Mom? You sound like a dying animal." Judy said it. Her voice said everything I've heard for years. "You're useless. You're expired. Go away." I did not answer. The kind of silence that has weight, not peace. Down the corridor behind closed doors, I heard Chris whisper to her, "Tomorrow will end her life. No pain, just silence." Judy did not respond. She did not protest. She did not gasp. Her silence was the confirmation I needed. The coldness in the room, no space heater, the window cracked a little for ventilation, matched the air in my chest. My breath came easy, still, despite his words. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I turned and walked back into the room the house called mine. The lasagna dish sat uneaten on the counter beside the TV remote, face down like the silence in the house. My suitcase, small, olive canvas, the one I always took when I visited Judy's first apartment, stood open with the few clothes I allowed myself. A beige cardigan, one wool skirt, and a gray sweater I refused to give away. I unzipped the front pocket and slipped in 3 items: a USB drive whose label read, "Voices, 2024", a sealed envelope labeled, "Original Will, C.E. Holloway", and a folded letter from my late husband, George. Those were the things they had never known I possessed. I glanced at the old apartment photos pinned above the dresser Judy at 5, my arm around her, roses behind us in the garden. Then I looked at the metal radiator, cold, and the tiny window open. I closed it quietly and locked the door behind me. I did not wait for congratulations. I did not ask for permission. The air outside tasted of damp earth and distant traffic. I pulled the suitcase strap over my shoulder. The small lamp on the porch flickered in the gust of wind. My mind was sharp. I remembered the words in Chris's whisper, and I felt something old stir. Survival, not surrender. I stepped into the night, down the front walk, past the hedge that used to bloom in June and had been neglected for years. I did not pause. I kept my steps steady, though my heart pounded, not with fear, but with clarity. They thought they were burying me in life. I was choosing my exit. Behind me, the house was silent. No door closed after my footsteps. No one called my name. That was the moment I accepted that I already had been dismissed. I walked to the road, flagged a taxi, and when the driver asked where I wanted to go, I said softly, "Pennsylvania Station." He nodded, asked no questions. The suitcase sat between my knees. That ride was not escape. It was proof I still could move. I thought of Judy then, not as a daughter who loved me, but as a girl who learned fear young. She allowed his whisper. She did not ask why they were planning the end of my life. When they wake tomorrow and find me gone, they will see only an empty hallway and an untidy guest room. But they will hear the evidence. The suitcase felt light. The night felt new. I had carried my past too long inside walls that did not want me. Now the road stretched. My breath was not loud. It was steady. Out of that door, I left everything they told me I was. Invisible, burdensome, dispensable. I left my fear there, in the guest room radiator that did not work. In the taxi's mirror, I saw my reflection. A woman with more years behind her than ahead. My eyes glowed with a quiet decision. I opened the window a crack and felt the cold air hit my face. I breathed deeply and thought, tomorrow they will continue their silence, but I will narrate something. I will live, and when they wake, their plan will have already failed. I remember the shift in the air the night I left. Wasn't the first time I felt invisible, it was only the loudest. I'd tuned out the breadcrumbs of disregard for years, but tonight the wind carried them back. Years before that night, I had been a nurse for decades before retirement, and I once left the maternity ward in the middle of my shift to help a woman whose baby's heart wouldn't beat. I held her hand, while machines screamed flat, and watched the surgeon bring new hope. Judy was 3 months old then, in the nursery across the hall. I delayed her feeding. The memory haunts me even now. She heard of it years later. Though I'd saved a life, she believed I chose an other over her. "Mom," she said years later, "you saved a stranger while I watched you leave." Chris used to lean back when I walked into their living room, looking straight at Judy and whispering so I heard, "Your mother loves herself more than she ever loved you." He let it hang between the two of us, measured and ugly. Judy didn't defend me. She didn't say stop. She remained still. She let the words make their home. I helped them buy the house after Judy finished school. I sold my savings, borrowed from an old friend, paid the tuition, covered the down payment. I paid hospital bills when Judy was pregnant with her first child. I never asked for anything. In my mind, love was enough. To Judy, it was debt. It is not easy when the person you carry becomes the one who says you owe. They used my social security number to secure their loan one winter afternoon. While I was asleep, the guest suite allowance transformed into a monthly stipend. The joint tenancy became life estate only. I awoke to new papers. My signature once trusted. I was told it was routine. But then the tax letter arrived, my social security co-signed for their renovation. I was no longer a mother in a home. I was a liability. Late in the evening, I stood by the hallway, light flickering. Judy passed without looking up. She paused, then said with soft cruelty, "You're not a guest, Mom. You're a ghost in this house." The words sank like heavy snow. I froze. My breath came slow. I wondered how long I'd been haunting this place. I closed the door behind me and sat in the dark room assigned to me. The radiator hissed empty air. I sat in the dark, wrapped in silence that felt heavier than sleep. I thought of all the nights Chris laughed at my knitting and the nights Judy pressed her phone to her ear and left the room. I turned off the light, but the darkness didn't comfort me. It reminded me I was overlooked. In the morning, I packed a small suitcase, folding my cardigan and sweater carefully, tucking in a legal folder I had hidden away these months. They believed I was too old to keep secrets. They believed I was too weak to act. But I learned years ago that survival doesn't mean you stay, it means you choose. I remembered Chris's words. Tomorrow. I remembered Judy's silence. And I decided I would not wait. I kept my eyes closed when I heard the front door click shut at midnight. The hallway light was dim, and I had slipped into the old bed in the guest room. Judy thought I was asleep. Chris thought I was nearly gone. They did not know I was wide awake, holding my phone under the pillow. In the darkness, I heard it all. Chris whispered behind closed doors, "You see, the life insurance policy could pay out $60,000, and once she's gone, the house is ours. Nobody will ask questions." Judy's voice trembled. "Chris, you're scaring me." Chris laughed softly. "Good. Silence is golden, and your silence will make you rich." I pressed the record button. I moved ever so slightly, so my hand did not make a sound. The bedside lamp flickered. The hallway clock ticked. I stayed still. My heart pounded, but I told myself, this is documentation, not panic. They came closer. Chris stepped into the hallway, low-voiced but sure. "Tomorrow will end her life. No pain, just silence. And the insurance will look like natural causes. Judy, you'll come out ahead." I felt Judy inhale sharply. I did not open my eyes. I did not cry. I held onto my phone beneath the pillow. A minute passed, then 2. The door closed softly. Footsteps receded. I did not move. I did not breathe louder than normal. I exhaled slowly. The record icon glowed red. I had it. In the morning, I left a note on the kitchen table, in Judy's neat handwriting she might recognize. "I know, you'll lose everything if I die tonight." I positioned it so Judy would find it when she woke. Behind the note, I tucked the USB and the original will folder into my small suitcase. I had watched the documents change. I had waited for this night. The rain had started while I packed. By the time I left, the ground was slick and the wind small but sharp. My suitcase felt heavier than I remembered. It held my clothes, my strength, and the proof. I walked out into the night, the porch light hissing in the wind. The bus stop was a half-mile away. I unzipped my coat and let the rain kiss my hair. My cane clicked on the pavement, but I did not slow down. I reached the bus stop bench, empty, wet. I put the suitcase next to me and waved down the bus. The driver smiled politely and helped lift my bag. I said, "Take me to the station." No address. No explanation. As the bus pulled away, I looked back at the house, dark windows, no sign of movement. I thought of the years I spent hiding in corners, silenced by love and debt, delayed by guilt and duty. Tonight I carried a voice. I carried proof. I arrived in a new town before dawn. The rain stopped, leaving everything damp and quiet. I settled into a small motel. I switched on the television, heard nothing but static. I placed the suitcase by the door and sat on the bed. My hands were steady. I played back the recording, loud enough to hear their voices, clear enough to see their faces in my mind. I thought of Judy, how she did not stop him, how she accepted things under the table. I thought of Chris, how he smiled when I asked if the guest room was warm enough and he said, "It's fine for someone like you." And I thought of myself. I was no longer the woman who waited for permission to be loved. I was the woman who had permission to leave. The USB's label caught the light, glowing faintly red. The will folder was firm in my coat. The rain had baptized me, the bus had carried me away, and I was free. I contacted my old lawyer, Mr. Henderson, who represented my husband decades ago, and walked into his wood-paneled office with a small suitcase and a muted determination in my voice. "Harry," I began without preamble, "I need you to look at these documents." He raised his brow when I opened the case and placed the USB and the sealed will folder on his desk. He had handled elder abuse cases before. Nothing surprised him anymore. But even he flinched when he heard my recording. "Where did you get these?" he asked. I answered simply, "I kept them because I was afraid you'd never believe me." Henderson plugged in the USB. He pressed play. The voices filled his office. Chris's whisper, "Tomorrow will end her life. Insurance pays out." Silence. Judy's tremor. "Chris, you're scaring me." Henderson's jaw dropped. He looked at me. "This is extraordinary." I nodded. "That is only part of it." I handed him the envelope from George, the original will, naming me sole heir should he die. "They altered this while I slept," I said. "I woke to papers I did not sign." We spent the next hour quietly drafting a plan. Henderson committed. "I'll send the file to homicide and elder abuse units this afternoon. I'll make sure insurance fraud investigators are involved." I watched his reaction. Relief, yes, but also the weight of what I'd done. I wasn't just every old woman in a guest room. I was a witness. I was evidence. Later that day, Chris received a formal subpoena. Judy's phone rang at work. Summons to testify as a witness. At breakfast, she argued with me. "You are ruining everything, Mom," she said, voice tight. I looked at her calmly. "No, Judy. You didn't just leave me. You signed the permission slip." She stormed off, leaving the bowl of oatmeal half-eaten. I listened to the door close, and then sat, empty-handed, and breathed. That night I installed a mailbox at the motel and sent the original will, the USB zeroed copy, and a cover letter to the state attorney. I watched the rain on the motel window as I sealed the envelope. My past had been drafted in silence. Now it would be recorded in statute. The next morning I woke to 2 messages. One from Henderson, one from Judy. Henderson: "They've opened a formal investigation. Stay safe." Judy: "Mom, can we talk?" I stared at the "can we talk" text for minutes before deleting it. Not yet. I was no longer writing to prove my worth. I was writing to reveal. 3 days after the subpoenas, the rest of Chris's secrets surfaced like rot under fresh paint. The air in that house turned poisonous long before the police arrived. Judy had always believed that his temper was stress, his late nights were business, and his distance was just how men process things. That illusion cracked when a voicemail arrived, one of those careless, late-night messages where lust sounded like ownership. A woman's voice, slurred with drink and entitlement, cooed, "You said she'll never find out. Can't wait for Belize." The shock didn't come all at once. It arrived in waves. First disbelief, then nausea, then a hollow quiet. Judy sat in the kitchen, phone in hand, as if the recording were a trick of bad reception. Then came the bank statements. Withdrawals she didn't recognize, gambling charges, a secret account. The pattern was undeniable, deceit layered upon deceit. The man she had defended, protected, lied for, was neither faithful nor clean. Guilt began to rot her faster than betrayal did. She had stood by him while he humiliated me, while he twisted her love into a weapon. Now she saw how deep that poison had run. The neighbors, who once smiled at her with envy for her perfect husband, stopped waving. Friends from church deleted her from their group chats. Her coworkers avoided eye contact in the cafeteria. She told Henderson later that she felt like a ghost walking through her own life. Online, strangers called her the wife who helped cover a murder plot. She didn't respond to any of them. What could she say? They were wrong about her motives, but right about her silence. She had chosen blindness, and the world had forced her eyes open. One night, she came home to an empty driveway. The house was dark except for the kitchen light flickering above the sink. Chris's clothes were gone. The sheriff's business card waited in the mailbox, wanted for questioning. His signature arrogance, he hadn't even tried to hide the trail. Inside, the house felt foreign. His cologne still lingered, that harsh scent of cheap cedar and something synthetic. Judy climbed the attic stairs, driven by instinct more than reason. She found the old cedar chest I'd left behind. The one she used to complain cluttered the hallway. She recognized the faint smell of camphor before she saw it, the same scent that once lingered on my sweaters when she was small. The latch creaked open. Inside were fragments of the woman she had forgotten. I once was my nursing pins, worn soft by decades of service, the apron she used to tug as a child while I cooked, and a stack of journals, yellowed around the edges, written in my handwriting. She opened one, trembling, and read the first entry she found. Judy fell today, scraped her knee. She looked up at me with fire in her eyes, as if pain was not something to fear, but something to fight. She read it 3 times, her tears blurring the ink. That was the girl I had seen, the fierce, unyielding soul buried beneath all her compliance. At the bottom of the chest, she found a sealed envelope in her father's handwriting, dated 1979. She opened it with care, as if the paper might break under the weight of what it carried. I don't know how you keep giving love when no one gives it back. It's your gift, and it scares me. It was the last kind thing George ever wrote before bitterness swallowed him whole. For the first time, Judy saw her father not as the victim of my distance, but as the architect of his own cruelty. And she saw me not as the weak woman who endured it, but as the one who somehow survived it. The shame hit her like a storm. She sank to her knees, clutching the letters against her chest. All the years of judgment, the careless words she'd thrown at me, each one now echoed back in her own voice. "You're a ghost in this house." The words that once made me tremble now haunted her. That night, she called me. The number was unfamiliar. I didn't answer. Old habits fade slowly, and trust even slower. But the next evening, I heard the knock at the community center door. It was late, past closing. I opened it, and there she was, not the polished woman her husband had paraded around, but my daughter as she truly was, stripped of pretense, trembling, and human. Her eyes were swollen, her hands shaking. She tried to speak, but no words came at first. Finally, she managed, "I let the wrong man speak for me, and I let the right woman suffer for it." I stood still. The silence stretched between us, years of resentment, confusion, and missed chances condensed into a single breath. I wanted to hold her, to say it was all right. But forgiveness without truth is just silence wearing perfume. "You didn't just disappoint me, Judy," I said. My voice was calm, steady. I waited for her to deny it, but she didn't. "You handed me over." She nodded, tears sliding down her face. "I know." We stood there, the hum of the vending machine, the only sound in the hall. Then I softened. "But I see you now," I said quietly. "And maybe that's the first step back." We sat together for an hour, No raised voices, no denial. Just two women dismantling a lie, brick by brick. She told me everything: how Chris had isolated her, how he'd twisted her memories, turned kindness into control, how he convinced her that I was manipulative, selfish, a master of guilt. I thought love meant loyalty, she said through tears, even when it hurt, even when it didn't feel like love anymore. I nodded. That's what I thought once, too, and it almost killed me. Her head dropped into her hands. I wish I could undo it. You can't, I said softly, but you can stop dragging it forward. She looked up, eyes red but clearer than I'd ever seen. I want to. I know, I whispered, and wanting is the seed of change. For the first time in years, her gaze held reverence, not resentment. I reached across the table, placed my hand over hers, and said, I gave birth to you once, Judy, but today you're born again through apology. The words hung in the air, warm and heavy. She began to cry, and this time I didn't hold back. I stood, pulled her close, and wrapped my arms around her. It was the same embrace I'd given her when she was 5 and ran to me after her first nightmare, the same warmth, the same heartbeat. Only now, it came after decades of distance. That hug didn't erase what happened, but it redrew the lines between us. It didn't rewrite history, but it changed something fundamental. It took the shards of our broken years and placed them side by side, not perfect, but together. When she finally pulled away, she whispered, I don't deserve this. I smiled. That's the beauty of forgiveness, child. It's never about deserving, it's about returning. That night, after she left, I sat alone under the soft glow of the exit sign and realized that redemption doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives quietly, on trembling feet, wearing yesterday's shame. But when it comes, it changes everything. And as I locked up the center and stepped into the cool night air, I thought, maybe we both learned how to fight pain again, not by denying it, but by finally facing it. He tried to run. They always do when the lies start catching up, when the walls they built from deceit begin to tilt inward. Chris booked a one-way flight to Belize under a false name. He thought he could slip away quietly, cash his hidden accounts, and start a new life far from Pennsylvania, far from the burden he had planned to bury. But arrogance makes men careless. He used the same passport he'd taken on his honeymoon with Judy, same initials, same smirk in the photograph. The airport scanner didn't miss a thing. They caught him at the boarding gate, just before dawn. I learned later that he tried to charm the officers, telling them there must have been a mistake. But there's no charm strong enough to cover up conspiracy, insurance fraud, and a recorded confession. They cuffed him while travelers watched, confused and fascinated by this man in a pressed shirt and expensive shoes being led away like any other criminal. His name hit the news by noon. When the call came, I was in the community garden, trimming the lavender beds. Henderson's voice trembled with satisfaction. They've got him, Saris. Interpol confirmed the warrant. He's being transferred back for trial. I closed my shears, looked up at the sky, and said nothing for a long time. Just listened to the sound of the wind moving through the branches. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sighs. The trial began 2 months later. I didn't attend the first sessions. I didn't need to see his face again, but Judy did. She sat in the front row, head high, voice steady when she took the stand. The prosecutor asked, Mrs. Dalton, when did you realize your husband's plan? She looked down at her hands and said, when I heard my mother's recording, when I saw what fear looked like in her handwriting. And why are you testifying today? Because silence almost killed her, and it won't kill me. The courtroom murmured. Reporters scribbled furiously. For the first time in years, my daughter spoke for herself, not as someone's wife, not as someone's pawn, but as a woman reclaiming truth. Chris sat behind the glass, expression vacant. He avoided Judy's eyes. When they played the recording, his face shifted, shock first, then fury. He realized the night I pretended to sleep was the night he buried himself. His voice echoed through the courtroom speakers. Tomorrow will end her life. No pain, just silence. Those words became his sentence. He was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and elder abuse. His name hit the headlines by noon. By dusk, his company deleted his profile, his friends deleted his number, and silence became his only ally. 25 years, no bail. The same judge who once handled George's estate case now read his verdict with ice in his tone. "You preyed upon the woman who gave your family everything," he said, "and now the law will take everything from you." The reporters swarmed Judy as she left the courthouse. For the first time, the headlines weren't cruel. Daughter exposes husband's plot against her mother. Elder abuse case becomes symbol of courage. People sent letters to the center saying they saw themselves in our story, that they'd been afraid to speak, that now they would. That evening, Judy came to the garden again. She found me sitting by the fountain, watering the begonias. "He's gone," she said simply. I nodded. "The man who said I'd die silent," I told her, "is now silenced by the law." For the first time, I believed justice could sound like quiet. She sat beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. "I don't know how to start over," she whispered. "You already have," I said. "You chose truth." The sun dipped low, painting everything gold. For the first time in years, the air in my lungs felt light. Chris had taken my home, my peace, my name, but he could not take the final word. That belonged to me. And now, the silence he promised was finally his own. When the sentencing was done and the noise faded, I found myself staring at the same small suitcase I'd once carried into the night. Inside were old papers, court documents, and a single pillowcase, the one I'd filled with clothes the night I ran from Judy's house. It still smelled faintly of lavender detergent. That pillowcase had carried my fear once. I wanted it to carry something better now. When the restitution check arrived, I stared at it for hours before deciding. So I started the pillowcase fund. It began with a single check from the restitution Chris was ordered to pay. I told Henderson, "Every dollar that man earned from cruelty will turn into comfort for someone else." Within months, the fund became a registered nonprofit. Its mission was simple: to give elderly women a way out of abuse, silence, and financial dependence. A way to pack their bags, walk out the door, and still have somewhere to land. Judy became the executive director. I insisted on it. She had known both sides of that silence, how it starts, how it ends. "You'll make sure this work never becomes pity," I told her. "It must be power." She nodded, and for the first time in years, I saw in her the woman I'd hoped she would become. Not perfect, but awake. We opened the first shelter inside the very house where I had once been told I was a ghost. The same hallway that once echoed with Chris's whispers now filled with laughter, the sound of pots clanging, the shuffle of slippers and morning chatter. We repainted the walls in sunflower yellow and left the door to the guest room wide open. Outside, we placed a sign by the gate. "For those told to die quietly here, you live loudly." Women came in shy, nervous, clutching handbags that held more memories than possessions. They arrived from neighboring towns, nursing homes, hospitals. Some stayed for a night, some for months. Each time a new arrival walked through the door, I'd meet them with tea, a blanket, and the same sentence I once whispered to myself on a cold bus bench: "You made it." The house became alive in ways I'd forgotten homes could be. The kitchen smelled of stew and cinnamon. The garden bloomed brighter than it ever had. We hosted self-defense classes, legal aid workshops, and story nights where survivors shared what they'd endured and how they'd endured it. One woman said, "I thought silence was survival." I smiled and told her, "So did I. But silence is just a waiting room for courage." Judy worked tirelessly. She called donors, met with mayors, and spoke on radio shows about aging and autonomy. The same woman who once signed away my rights now spent her days giving other women theirs back. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me during meetings, as if trying to memorize the way I held a pen or the way my voice no longer trembled. One evening, she came to me after an event and said, "Mom, do you ever wish things had been different?" I took her hand. "No, I wish they had been sooner, but not different. The pain brought us here, and here is good." By the second year, the fund had grown beyond Pennsylvania. a local journalist wrote an article titled "The Pillowcase Fund, Where Survival Becomes Sanctuary." Donations poured in. A retired carpenter offered to build more rooms. A nurse volunteered medical care. Ethan, the boy from next door, who used to mow the lawn when Chris forgot, became our first volunteer coordinator. I no longer walked with my cane. The garden paths were smooth now. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch with a cup of tea, watching new residents arrive with trembling hands and cautious eyes. I'd smile and think, I know that look. I wore it once. Every pillowcase we provided came with a small stitch tag that read, "Pack your courage first." It became our motto. Women framed them, kept them, embroidered them on blankets. The phrase traveled farther than I ever thought my name would. On the anniversary of the fund's founding, Judy held a ceremony in the backyard. She unveiled a small bronze plaque mounted on the brick wall, in memory of every woman who thought she was alone, in honor of those who found their voice. The Pillowcase Fund, founded by Sarah Holloway. When she finished reading, she turned to me, tears shining in her eyes. "You taught me that survival isn't running, it's rebuilding." I smiled, touching the plaque. "And now, you're building a world where no one has to run." The crowd clapped. The sky blushed pink. And for the first time, that house no longer looked like the scene of my sorrow. It looked like a resurrection. It was early spring when Judy came into my office at the shelter. The sun caught the edges of her hair as she stood there, hands behind her back, like she used to do when she was little and guilty about something small, breaking a vase, stealing a cookie, hiding a bad grade. But this time, her guilt was soft, matured into tenderness. "Mom," she said quietly, "you deserve to be loved again." I looked up from the paperwork on my desk. "Oh, sweetheart, I've had plenty of love. From you, from the women here, from life finally giving me a second wind." She smiled, shaking her head. "No, not that kind. I mean the kind that makes you wear lipstick again." I laughed. "Lipstick? At my age?" "Especially at your age," she said. Then her eyes brightened. "I found someone you should see." Before I could ask, she held out a worn photograph, a group picture from the hospital in 1975. My own younger face, hair tucked neatly into a nurse's cap. And beside me, smiling, a man I hadn't seen in nearly 50 years, Lucas Hart. He was a paramedic back then, always the first one to volunteer for extra shifts, the first to make patients laugh even when they were bleeding. He had brought me peaches from his mother's orchard the day George proposed, and I remember him saying softly, "If he ever hurts you, you know where the orchard is." Then he'd smiled, like it was a joke. But I'd felt the truth behind it. I hadn't heard his name since I married, not until Judy found that photo while cataloging donations. "He's still in Pennsylvania," she said. "He never married. Runs a small clinic in Dover." I called him. He remembered you immediately. I froze, my fingers brushing the photograph. "You called him?" She grinned. And he said, "Sarah still like peaches?" Something in me broke open. A laugh, a tear, a warmth I hadn't felt in decades. 2 weeks later, I saw him again. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and spring air. He was older. Yes, white hair, deep lines, but his eyes were exactly the same. Calm, kind. The kind of eyes that never looked through you. When he saw me, he put down his clipboard. "You still like peaches?" I couldn't help it, I laughed. "Only when they're ripe," I said. He smiled. "Then you'll love this year's crop. Come see for yourself sometime." We talked for hours. About patience, about losses, about time. I told him about the Pillowcase Fund, about Judy, about the night I left. He told me about his mother's orchard, now tended by his nephews. "I kept thinking," he said quietly, "you'd come by someday, looking for those peaches." I looked down at my hands. I almost did, but life had other plans. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "Then maybe now it's time to make new ones." We started meeting for coffee on Sundays, at a small cafe near the river. He'd always bring a paper bag with 2 peaches inside, even when they weren't in season. We'd sit by the window, talking about everything and nothing, letting years fall away like dry leaves. One afternoon, Judy joined us. She carried her camera and snapped a picture of us laughing over something silly. "That's going on the wall at the center," she said. "Proof that redemption runs in this family." That summer, Judy suggested a trip. "Let's go see the ocean, Mom," she said. "You've spent your life giving others a place to land. It's time you see where the world begins." So we went. The three of us, me, Judy, and Lucas. We drove 6 hours east until the scent of salt filled the car and the sky opened wide. When we reached the beach, I stepped out first. The wind tugged at my scarf, and the roar of the Atlantic thundered in my chest. I had seen many things in my lifetime: birth, death, war, silence, but never the sea. Its vastness made me feel both small and infinite. Lucas walked beside me, his hand steady near mine. Judy ran ahead, laughing, her shoes in her hand, her hair whipping wildly in the wind. I closed my eyes, let the salt air sting my cheeks, and whispered to myself, "So this is what freedom smells like." We spent the afternoon collecting shells. Judy took photos of me holding one to my ear, pretending to listen for secrets. Lucas bought me ice cream and wiped a smear from my chin like we were 20 again. When the sun began to sink, we sat on a weathered bench, the waves stretching golden all the way to the horizon. "I used to think the end of my life would be quiet," I said, "that I'd fade out like a song nobody remembered." Lucas smiled. "Some songs don't fade, they just find a new verse." That night, back at the cottage Judy rented, I wrote a letter. Not a goodbye, just a reflection, folded neatly inside a peach-colored envelope. They whispered, "I'd die." I whispered, "I'm just beginning." I left it on the nightstand beside my bed, next to a single seashell and a photo Judy had taken earlier that day. Me and Lucas, laughing, the sea behind us, the world ahead. For once, there was no fear left to pack, only light, only love, and finally, peace. It happened 3 years after that first trip to the ocean. Judy had met someone. His name was Daniel Kind Eyes, quiet humor, the sort of man who listened more than he spoke. She met him at one of our pillowcase fund events, where he'd volunteered to help set up chairs. He wasn't flashy or clever, just steady, the kind of steady that reminded me what safety should sound like. When she brought him to dinner, I saw the difference instantly. Judy laughed freely again, head back, eyes closed, no apology. She looked like the girl I once rocked to sleep before the world hardened her. Lucas noticed too. He nudged my hand under the table and whispered, "She's home now." After months of gentle companionship, Daniel asked to marry her the following spring, in the same garden that once saved my life. Judy came to tell me first. She stood in the kitchen doorway, shy as if she were 17 again. "Mom," she said softly, "I want you and Lucas to sit in the front row. You started this new chapter. You should be there when I start mine." My throat caught. "Front row?" I teased. "That's a big seat for a ghost." She shook her head and came closer. "You're no ghost, Mom. You built the house that gave me back my soul." The wedding day arrived with sunlight spilling through every window. The backyard had been transformed into a wonderland rows of white chairs, strings of fairy lights, peach blossoms woven into the archway. The same tree that had once shaded my fears now shaded a future I hadn't dared to dream. I wore a soft lavender dress, one Lucas said matched the color of dawn. He stood beside me in a crisp gray suit, the same shy smile he'd had 50 years ago when he asked if I liked peaches. We held hands, our fingers still learning what it meant to belong after so many lonely years. When Judy walked down the aisle, her arm linked with mine, the guests rose. For a brief moment, the world blurred. Every hurt, every sleepless night, every whispered insult dissolved under that light. I saw not the child who once turned away from me, but the woman who had chosen to grow. Lucas leaned over and whispered, "She has your strength." I smiled. And her father's stubbornness. The ceremony was simple. Judy's voice trembled as she recited her vows. I used to believe love was endurance, but my mother taught me it's forgiveness. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, and applause rippled through the garden. When the music started, Lucas took my hand. "Dance with me," he said. "Oh, Lucas," I laughed. These knees have seen better days. He chuckled. Then we'll sway instead of dance. And so we did. Under the twinkle lights, between rows of tulips, I rested my head on his shoulder. Around us, laughter, clinking glasses, children chasing bubbles. Life, unfiltered. Judy passed by once, radiant, Daniel's arm around her waist. She leaned in and kissed my cheek. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, "for not giving up on me when I gave up on myself." I looked at her and said, "That's what mothers do. We wait, even when it hurts." Later, the photographer gathered us for one last picture. "The bride and groom," she called, "and the parents." Lucas and I stood together in the front row, while Judy and Daniel knelt beside us, their hands joined. The light caught the silver in my hair and the warmth in Lucas's smile. "Ready?" the photographer said. I reached for Judy's hand on one side and Lucas's on the other. Daniel placed his palm over hers. The shutter clicked. For a heartbeat, time held still. 4 lives once fractured, now stitched back together by mercy, forgiveness, and something greater than survival love reborn. That photograph hangs now in the hallway of the Pillowcase Fund's main office, framed in gold. Visitors always stop to look at it. 4 people, smiling beneath the same tree that once bore witness to pain. On the plaque beneath it are 5 simple words. Some stories do find endings. And whenever I pass by it on my way to the garden, I whisper to myself, yes, but this one also found peace. From a single pillowcase and a night of fear, she built a home where others could find their voices again, a legacy stitched from courage, forgiveness, and love. If this story moved you, if you believe that truth, justice, and kindness still matter, don't forget to subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Here, we keep the voices of women like Saris alive, women who were told to be quiet, yet chose to rise and rebuild louder than ever. Hit that subscribe button, share this story, and help us keep spreading strength, compassion, and hope, one true story at a time. This is Grandma True Stories, where silence ends and survival begins.